My name is Aster. In my last video, I sacrificed any chance in the algorithm, as well as my credibility, to make the argument that, in a vacuum, Waiting on a Wish isn't a terrible song. I listened to the rest of the Snow White soundtrack, and I felt similarly about most of the other songs. They're all pretty middling. But who cares? No, seriously, who cares? The other live-action remakes spurred famous videos about their soundtracks. Wish created a subculture-wide morbid fascination. Everyone knows the worst lines in Wish. It's so obviously bad to such an extreme degree. So many people have tried their hands at rewriting the lyrics out of sheer spite, and that's a video for another time. I mean, of course, if you clicked on this video, you care to some extent. You want to hear more about why exactly the music disappointed me, and I'll tell you why. Because it goes deeper than just rhyme scheme and song structure. Musical theater requires a certain thing to work properly. No, not perfect lyrics, and no, not perfect music either. Musical theater requires sincerity. Modern musical theater, as we know it, conceptually is kind of ridiculous. It's opera, but weirder, less ornate. The more modest plots of the past were traded for premises that sound kind of bonkers when you say them aloud. At its core, the concept of people randomly bursting into song to tell a story is pretty weird in and of itself. Opera is constantly sung, so you're used to it. Musicals, however, mostly swap between regular spoken dialogue and non-diegetic songs. That means you need to be ready to accept whatever's coming at you, and that's where suspension of disbelief comes in. Suspension of disbelief is the willingness people have to put aside logical thinking and accept the story in front of them. It's what stops us from going, hey, people can't survive falls from that height, or wouldn't you burn yourself if you could breathe fire? Some people don't have this skill, and we call these people intolerable.
We found you here like 6 hours ago.
Wait, they found her here 6 hours ago? The entire group of youngs waited around for 6 goddamn hours for Danny to sober the hell up?
So we're stopping in Waco before going to Pell's Village?
Look, the dialogue that's off-screen is some of the funniest in the movie. It's hilarious, but this makes zero sense. Mark should know pretty much exactly what he's getting into here.
It goes beyond fantasy, though. It's also the ability to accept drama for what it is, so you're not going, just talk it out, idiots, or something equally insufferable. It has, unfortunately, become something of a lost art. The 1-2 punch of TV tropes and cinema sins in the early 2010s truly did a number. People became horribly aware of every common storytelling device they'd come across, and felt a dire need to point it out. As a result, we now have stories that actively try to avoid sincerity. It's famous in the world of Marvel movies, which has led to terms like Whedonisms being thrown around to describe the painfully self-aware quips of Marvel characters.
You have no idea what you're dealing with.
Shakespeare in the Park? Doth mother know you weareth her drapes?
Tourist.
It was more than just being silly or self-referential, it was about the biting sarcasm behind it. It was written like the character was exasperated by the cliches, ostensibly as exasperated as the audience was. It did gangbusters. Marvel writing effectively trained audiences to seek out cliches and laugh at them. If anything got too dramatic, it would be laughed off with a quip. Audiences wouldn't have to grapple with any sincere emotions or dramatic moments. Now, with this anathema to musicals in place, we have a glaring contradiction to reckon with. Frozen. That came out in late 2013 and ended up with $1 billion in gross revenue. It was plenty sincere, so why the hype? Because it still undermined the Disney formula. There were a lot of people who lauded Frozen for avoiding the typical Disney tropes, mostly in regards to romance. Wow, Elsa doesn't get a prince. The main type of love is sisterly love, not romantic love. It's so subversive. Frozen was good for many more reasons than that, don't get me wrong, but that's what people back then focused on. And predictably, Disney wanted that level of success again. Moana has no love interest at all. The main villain didn't even have a personality. Like, the funny crab wasn't the main villain, he was an obstacle. I don't even remember what the actual final battle was about. Encanto didn't have a tangible villain, period. Whoa, the villain is generational trauma, man, that's crazy. Did those movies do what Frozen did in the box office? No, but they were well received. What did follow up Frozen in the box office were a couple of live-action remakes. Now, a lot of that could be chalked up to nostalgia baiting, but those live-action remakes did also try to, and heavy quotes, course correct some of the BuzzFeed tier controversies that cropped up in the early 2010s. For example, giving Jasmine more of a role in Aladdin, or making Belle more of a, Emma Watson ideal. Wish, on the other hand, totally bombed. Audiences found it disjointed, uninspired, and confusing. There are hours and hours of content out there explaining and analyzing the troubled production of Wish. At the end of the day, though, every aspect of that production led to the most fatal flaw possible: insufficient sincerity. From what I gather, no one truly meant what they produced for Wish. They were feeling their way through the dark, constantly being blindsided by the demands of superiors and executives. The fallout was a $100 million loss for Disney. As far as sheer numbers go, I made more money off Wish than Walt Disney Animation Studios, in that I made any amount of ad revenue over zero on my videos about it. We're now in 2025, and Snow White's live-action remake is also bombing. As of writing this, it's made $182 million, which sounds like a large number, but the budget is estimated at over $250 million. In the world of cinema, breaking even is considered to happen around 2.5 times the posted budget. That means Snow White is currently $443 million short of even hitting the non-loss mark. In other words, Snow White is currently the value of an entire Major League Soccer team away from hitting a non-red number. A big part of this was poor publicity. People were already sick of Disney, and Rachel Ziegler's comments on the original 1937 Snow White drew a lot of negative press. In fact, it made Ziegler's presence in the movie a major sticking point for many. Its visuals are also strange, the screenplay is rough, and most importantly for me, the music failed to resonate. To recoup my personal losses, I looked through the soundtrack for other songs to talk about. I thought maybe there's something on here I can really tear apart on a technical level. But if I'm being honest, the lyrics and instrumentals were decent. If I wanted to say they were the worst thing ever, I'd have to make up new standards and rules and have the lyrics retroactively break them. In other words, I'd have to really exaggerate, and I don't like doing that. However, I don't actually like any of the songs. I wouldn't willingly go back to listen to any of them except for the sake of a video. Let me explain why through the lens of Sincerity. The opening number of the movie is called Good Things Grow. It's an establishing number meant to set up and inform us of the circumstances of the story. You know the sort. Willkommen from Cabaret, No One Mourns the Wicked from Wicked, the gigantic prologue from Into the Woods, etc. You'd be hard-pressed to find a musical without one. Practically every Disney movie since the Renaissance has an opening number for the purpose of establishing setting. Good Things Grow sounds like the lowest common denominator of every modern opening number. It begins with a moderate tempo, percussion, repeating strings, and woodwinds. The first thing that came to mind actually was The Octopath Traveler. The singing starts with the king saying how insert adjective the setting is. Abundant in this case. Everything is insert status quo.
Look upon this land, on the home we've come to know, where we plant a tender seed, trusting something good will grow.
After his verse, he is joined by the queen. Then, ensemble character number 1 comes in to say his part, followed by ensemble character number 2.
There are wonders to be found in the fields and the fruits that they bear.
To mix things up, ensemble characters number 3 and 4 come in at the same time, for that harmony. Everyone comes together for the last line of the stanza.
A beautiful abundance we share.
If this is sounding familiar, it's because it feels like it was built on a template. I can't comment on anything specific, there's no point. I know that high-energy opening numbers are considered practically mandatory to establish a setting, but there are absolutely more interesting ways to do it. An important aspect is to set up the sound for the musical. The opening number introduces the audience not just to the story, but to how the following music will generally sound. The problem with Snow White 2025 is that it lacks sonic identity. It sounds like a parody of musicals, like, who cares, it's a musical, all musicals these days sound the same anyway. Pasek and Paul certainly weren't thinking that, but they also likely had nothing else to work with. As I briefly mentioned in my last video, the original Snow White took a lot of cues from the popular music of the time. In the 1930s, soft singing, better known as crooning, was the style.
Wishing for the one I love to kiss me once, then kiss me twice, then kiss me once again.
Accordingly, instrumentation also softened quite a bit from the previous era of big band. An interesting path for the modern remake would have been to add songs that try and capture this style. Not going that direction left Pasek and Paul with a void. Instead of an interesting sonic palette that's reminiscent of a distinct era, they had to default to generic modern Broadway sound. See, a 1930s pop-style musical goes against a lot of the rules of modern musical theater. No belting allowed, no emotional yelling, no swelling violins. Popular music, it's enough to make a theater major shudder. The songs would have to be reserved for quieter moments instead of particularly charged ones. I mean, we have an extremely famous example of what it would sound like, The Wizard of Oz. First of all, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, greatest movie song ever written. Secondly, we come back to Sincerity. Even the comedic songs of Wizard of Oz are there for the sake of endearing character moments. There isn't a point in the movie where you feel like the story or the characters are jokes. It's all played very straight. The point of the movie is to tell a story, not to make a comment and not to fit a template and not to mock. In its current state, Disney would never let itself be that sincere. It has a formula and it has ludicrous, if baffling, sets of standards to adhere to. Like the live-action remakes before it, Snow White 2025 takes many liberties with the story to make the titular character more of an active, assertive protagonist. It also makes sure to really rub it in. Princess Problems is about as insincere as it gets. It's about this character Jonathan telling Snow White she's a pampered princess who needs to look at the real world. It's done in that, like, Avenue Q voice, you know the one.
Does that dampen your day? Do the facts make you frown? Waking up to the real world is bringing you down.
It's a mocking and mean song. I don't think that's an inherently bad thing, to be clear. It just has to be done well, and has to be done kind of in the context of the story. What I dislike about Princess Problems is that it feels like it's there to pander to the bygone BuzzFeed crowd. See, we're being modern and subversive, we're acknowledging the problem. Except, of course, that problem didn't really exist. Snow White in the original is a kind but self-assured soul. I never saw her as a pushover. Princess Problems isn't mocking the spoiled, myopic gentry as much as it is mocking the original Snow White. I mean, we got lines like this.
You begin to get wise, 'cause you can't fix the world making apple pies.
What's that about? Who asked? The hopefulness and purity behind the original are being sacrificed for the sake of sneering criticism. It's very ugly. More than that, it's directly attacking our suspension of disbelief by applying real-world standards to a classic fairy tale. When our suspension of disbelief is crumbling, we struggle to take anything at face value. We can't take the story seriously because it thinks that it itself is stupid. It makes you ask why you're even trying to get invested, and in the case of a musical, it makes it difficult to enjoy any of the songs because of the inherent goofiness. Disney's recent films prime you to go in without the suspension. Let's go back to Good Things Grow. Generic modern musical opening song. Not bad, but without my suspension of disbelief, it just makes me roll my eyes. It makes me painfully aware of the cliches and template it's working with. It's the kind of song that makes me turn to my girlfriend and go, "Babe, do I even like musicals?" If it tried a more unique style, that could have outweighed that problem, because putting in that kind of effort shows sincerity. My suspension of disbelief, at least for that moment, would be repaired. I don't think it would totally fix the movie, of course. Even stylized, Princess Problems carries the same issues in its content. It's still there to tell us the original Snow White was dumb. But if the movie had any sincerity, the song wouldn't exist. It would be considered out of place because it's jeering at the inspiration for the story. Anyone who loved that inspiration wouldn't want this song here. Even Waiting on a Wish, without sincerity, completely falls flat. It sounds good, yes, but a big part of its existence is to make Snow White seem less passive. Because it exists out of spite, it loses any potential magic, so to speak. It's not there to simply tell the story, because the story is there to spite its inspiration. It's there to one-up it, to reinvent it. And I don't think reinventing classic fairy tales is a bad thing, not at all. Del Toro's stop-motion Pinocchio is a fantastic example of someone taking a famous existing story and, out of love, creatively reframing it through a new lens. Snow White 2025 isn't trying to do that. The lens it's looking through is one cultivated by cynicism and a desperate attempt to appeal to a board. And now, Disney has apparently halted production on the live-action Tangled. They've realized we're no longer here for this. We want something earnest. A musical, or really almost any kind of art, needs sincerity to work. No matter how sarcastic it is, no matter how silly, it still needs to exist for itself. If it's there only to fulfill a template or only there to make some kind of commentary, it won't leave an impact. At least, not a good one. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing for more analysis on the intersection of words and music. Have a wonderful day.